I basically learned that, for basically 50 years of my life, I was looking through Daryl's lenses and thought I was thriving, basically. And once I went through the course, I was able to look through God's lenses, and wow, was I surviving for 50 years.
I have so much more peace in my heart. I think for so long I struggled with just performance-based love, and how I equated that was if I'm doing more, that's more approval from God. And to just have the freedom and the permission to not feel like I have to be everything for everyone. I'm not Jesus. That's 100% his role. And so what is my role in that? And going deeper with how God created me. I am created, I'm a masterpiece, created for good works. And, just being able to rest in that and have the freedom to say no to things, have the freedom to bring my best and bring my voice to bear has been wonderful.
The change that I saw in my relationship with God was that I learned how to trust him more in little things and how to come to him when I felt like it was too much for me to handle by myself, as opposed to just trying to self-will or power myself through things that I had done before in the past. And so for the first time, I was actually looking to God to help me with those parts of my story that I felt like I didn't have any control over.
So my relationship with God has changed through this journey in kind of a cool yet very simple way. As I was going through this process and seeing my life written out on paper and saying, this is where I was, these are the main highlights that I remembered, good and bad, through these different time frames in life, I realized God has always been there. And it's just really cool to watch how he's really been there. And so you take that and you're like, okay, that's almost a tangible way to see God in your life, just to write it out on paper. So if you do nothing else, at least write it on paper. Be like, oh, these are the things that I remember from my childhood, high school, college, whatever, and watch where was God in those moments.
I came to Heartland 30 years ago believing, but very damaged, very broken, very, very unchurched. So my trust level was at a -20. So when you come to church and you hear these things, you are wonderfully and marvelously made. He is your creator. You were put here for a purpose. Intellectually, you begin to think those. But the biggest shift is when it comes from the head and goes to the heart. When you wake up and you go, I am wonderfully and marvelously made, and you believe it. And I'm just now realizing that when I invite him into my conversations, because I have a party going on in my head all the time, and I have to be careful with who I invite. And the one person that I didn't invite was him, and the ones that I did invite were guilt and shame. So the shift is inviting him into the conversation. And what happens is there's not as much room, and hopefully at some point there will be no room for guilt and shame.
Being in the Word and praying, it was often a checklist. It was a to-do list, a programmed thing. And now it's really been driven more out of where do I want to journey with God today, and being intentional about that and letting that be a part of my routine instead of just something I feel obliged to do. And there are days that I do it and I'm not completely into it, but understanding story better now, reading through God's story has a different light, because now I can see my highs and lows are illustrated in the highs and lows we read of people's stories throughout Scripture. And sometimes we kind of get what I refer to as the Sunday school God in our perception of who he is, that it's all the good things, it's David beating Goliath. But then we also see, through reading through Scripture and getting to know God's story and the people that followed God, we get to see the highs and lows of the life that they experienced. And so the story of God becomes so much more real, because I get to relate to their story because I see my experiences in them, and I haven't always looked at it that way.